All right, so welcome to our discussion of Chanukah, the most Jewish of holidays. What do I mean? What do I mean the most Jewish of holidays? Well, the way it's celebrated and the way the values it represents, I want to argue, make it one of the most Jewish of holidays. Now, what does that mean? Let's take a look. So I call it the most Jewish of holidays. Let's see, what do I mean by that? So which key values are represented by Chanukah? So let's take from the audience for a second. What do you think makes it the most Jewish of holidays? What key values are represented by Chanukah that make it sort of typical Jewish holiday, or even the quintessential Jewish holiday?
We won the war and we cleaned up the temple.
Winning a war is very Greek. It's very Roman. It's not so Jewish. To win, recently we started winning wars, but I wouldn't call that the most Jewish.
Rabbi, I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking what Charlie's thinking. I mean, Rabbi Sachs, he gave a lecture about how Hanukkah in some ways is very not Jewish because it's revolved around the war. So
right.
I don't know where you're going with this.
Right.
It's the miracle,
it's
the miracle of the
maybe
oil.
it's the least Jewish holiday. So very good. Charlie and Jacob are arguing. Maybe it's the least Jewish holiday because it's about military victory. Go on.
Oil, as sure as
The
said.
oil, the miracle of the oil.
What about it? Why does that make it the most Jewish of holidays? So there was a miracle. A lot of religions have holidays. I don't know, have miracles. I don't know. Why does that make it? Maybe
It was a miracle in the temple.
We don't really. Is there any other holiday that's about a miracle? I don't know. Purim a little bit, Pesach a little bit, but it's not about. It's more naturalistic kind of a thing. We don't have a holiday just for the splitting of the sea, for the falling of the man. So I'm not sure. So it's interesting, right? So it's not so obvious why it's the most Jewish of holidays. Let's take a look. So the first thing that makes it the most Jewish of holidays is that the holiday is related to Hoda'ah, which means Thanksgiving. Who was the first person to give Thanksgiving? It was the mother of Judah, Leah. And what did she say? She said, Vatarod, she gave birth to a fourth son. This time I'm going to thank God. So she called him Judah, which has the word Yehudah, Hoda'ah, Modim, Todah, Thanksgiving. And then she didn't have any other children for a while. So the idea of Thanksgiving is embedded in Judah's name. We're all known as Jews. So therefore, there's an idea that as Jews, the most Jewish thing we can do is give Thanksgiving. I'm just going to mute a few people. Welcome to Frank. The most Jewish thing we can do is give Thanksgiving, and therefore it's a very Jewish holiday because it's all about the word Judah, the word Hoda'ah. To go a step further with that, the rabbis say that after a number of years, they established Chanukah as a day of Hallel and Hoda'ah, Thanksgiving. And if the word Jew means Yehudi, from the word Yehudah, about Modeh and Modim, and it comes from Leah, our matriarch, who called him Thanksgiving. She's the first person who gave thanks to God. That's what the rabbis say. Therefore, it's the most Jewish of holidays in the sense of the word Jew. The word Jew has to do with Hoda'ah, with thanks, and this holiday is all about thanks. And the Sefat Emet actually talks about the relationship of this holiday with Judah and Joseph, because this time of year we read about Judah and Joseph. Very interesting. This year was unusual. One day of Rosh Chodesh, it fell on a Friday, and it turned out that we read Vayeshev for Chanukah and not Miketz. Miketz is after Chanukah, so it's very unusual. But that's the way. There are a lot of midrashim about the sale of Joseph and the fight between Judah and Joseph and the idea of Chanukah. So on Chanukah, we recognize the fight between Judah and Joseph, and Judah represents the Thanksgiving. What does Joseph represent? Mentioned in the 10 Minutes for Torah. Joseph has audacity. He tells the king what to do and where to go. Chutzpah. What's chutzpah about Chanukah? Hallel. When you say, God, I'm going to give praise to you, that's chutzpah. a human being to tell God that he's good or great or amazing, that's chutzpah. So Hallel and Hodah, we have two things on Chanukah. Hallel, that's chutzpah, that's Yosef, and Hodah, to admit that you're wrong, like Judah did, and to give thanksgiving, that's Judah. It's the most Jewish of holidays because it's got Thanksgiving. Then I would argue that it's the most Jewish of holidays because it relates to the big three. Three big things that we as Jews value very much. The Sefat Emet mentions, and we'll see the source for it in a minute, but the Greeks wanted to stop Chodesh, that's Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos, and Bris Milah, the circumcision. And those are the things which make the Jews special, unique. In the world, Shabbat relates to the whole world when God created. Time, Rosh Chodesh has to do with time, and the soul, the Bris Milah, is in the person. So it's in the three realms of existence: time, space, and the human soul. So they were trying to stop the big three aspects of Judaism: Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos, and Bris Milah. Can anyone tell us why are Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh of all things, and the Bris Milah, why are they essential to Judaism? Well, let's start with the following. Which one's most obvious that it's essential to Judaism?
Shabbos.
Bris Milah.
Or Bris Milah, right.
Yeah,
Why?
Bris Milah.
Right. Shabbos is more obvious. I mean, Bris Milah is more obvious. Why, Jacob?
But it's a physical, you can physically. Yeah.
And why, Michelle, why did you say Shabbos?
Because it happens every single week.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, someone once did an analysis of the ultra-Orthodox community and said, basically, they just live the whole week so they can make a nice Shabbos. It's central to the Jewish life is the Shabbos, right? So that's what they say in the Gemara Megilat, that Gentiles would sometimes poke fun at the Jews. They say, Shehi Pei. Every minute they say, oh, it's Shabbos, I can't work. Oh, it's Pesach, I can't work. So Jews we take time to actually breathe and live. We don't just keep mowing our lawn all week. No, we actually take time. So it's the quintessential Jewish thing. It's something that's central to Jewish life. Chad Ha'am was a secular thinker. He said that more than the Jews have kept Shabbos, Shabbos has kept the Jews. It's an essential identifier. But what about Rosh Chodesh? Why is Rosh Chodesh a central thing? And why did the Greeks care? Let us have a Rosh Chodesh. Who cares? And nobody will even notice we have Rosh Chodesh. They care. We say this paragraph in their davening. We say that paragraph. Who cares? Why do you think they wanted to stop Rosh Chodesh?
If we
we
didn't
would
have our
know when our holidays
Chodesh, the rest
were.
of the calendar would be taken out.
Right. So we mentioned the other week that without that you can have any calendar. Right. And it's also that's one annoying thing about Jews. We have our own calendar. I think I quoted Rabbi Salvation mentioned from Queen Victoria that she said she didn't mind the Jews. But why do we have our own burial places, our own cemeteries? If you're a Brit, be buried with the Brits. What's the problem? So the idea that we have a separate calendar that Gentiles don't even know what day is it? What Hanukkah? When is it over here? Over there? Is it the same time as Christmas or not? That is sort of a mysterious thing because we have our own. We're like on our own. We beat to our own drummer. So so Hanukkah is the most quintessential holiday because it preserved the three quintessential Jewish things: our Jewish time, our devotion to Shabbos, so central to being Jewish. And some people find it annoying. Why is people always talking about who keeps Shabbos, doesn't keep Shabbos? Why don't we focus on other things? But you can't argue. You have to argue that Shabbos is important. It's a central thing about Judaism. You can have a lot of Jewish things without Shabbos, but it doesn't usually last too long. Shabbos is the glue that makes the family stay together, and it brings a Jewish tradition. So anyway, that's the big three, quintessential Jewish. Who said? Where does it say that those are the three things the Greeks persecuted us? So very often Jews don't quote from the book of Maccabees; they quote from the Megilat of Antiochus. Who wrote the book of the Megilat of Antiochus? There are different theories. Some say it was between the 2nd and 5th century. It's quoted by people in the 9th century. Some people say it's in the school of Hillel and Shammai. It's the early Talmudic period. Rav Sadia Gaon said it was an Aramaic language by the Hashmonaim themselves. and he translated into Arabic. But Louis Ginsburg, who is a more secular Jewish scholar, he said, no, it's a spurious work. It's unhistorical, and except when they quote the Book of Maccabees. So anyway, it's an interesting debate. So so classical Jews don't quote the Book of Maccabees; they quote the Megilat of Antiochus. It was more traditional. So they say that they said the Greeks said, "We're going to come to you, Nuvatel me, and we're going to stop from you the bris." If you don't read Hebrew so well, take a look at the bris, right? And Shabbos, you see, and Rosh Chodesh, and Milah. Well, it's the same as the bris. So it's the basis of the bris. You might argue that Shabbos is a covenant with God, the bris is a covenant with God, and Rosh Chodesh is part of all the holidays, which are part of the covenant with God. You can show that every time God made a covenant with the Jews, whether it's before the Egel, after the Egel, the golden calf, whether it's the end, before they go into Israel, he always reiterates the holidays, and the holidays are based on Rosh Chodesh. Okay. However, if you want to look at a more clearly historical document in the Book of Maccabees, and there it says it too. They should prohibit Sabbath, festival days. He commanded the holy place to be profaned, and altars to be built, and the swine's flesh to be immolated, and unclean beasts, and they should leave their children uncircumcised, and let their souls be defiled by uncleanliness, abominations. That's not kosher. So that's also a quintessential Jewish thing. So we had the festivals, so different sacrifices. So clearly, at least in a longer laundry list of things, those three things are there, and maybe even kosher food as well. The pig, which is the quintessential Jewish forbidden food. Okay, so we were talking about the centrality of each of these things: Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, and bris. Okay. The Sfat Emet makes another argument. He's the first Ger Rebbe. He says it's an attack on memory. And who can tell us why memory is the quintessential Jewish thing?
Well, I know at Pesach, the point is that each son can say, my grandfather, my great-grandfather remembers the past and was there. You know, if you go back 4 generations, somebody was there at it.
Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy.
Ah,
Right.
there you go.
What else?
Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy.
Remember the Sabbath day, remember the Exodus. What else?
Oh, you want to remember the golden calf.
Yeah, there is a mitzvah. Remember, there's 6 remembrances, and one of them is to remember how we made God angry with the golden calf. Good. If you look at how Jews commemorate the Holocaust in our generation, it's the envy of all oppressed people. You know, the African American community wishes that they could get the attention that we have for the Holocaust for slavery. Right? We got reparations right away. They're still waiting for reparations. The Kurds have been wiped out. The Armenians are like begging people to notice that the 1 million Kurds were killed in, what was it, 1910 or 1920? I can't remember because it's not popular. It's not a famous thing.
No, yeah, during World War I, yeah.
Yeah, people don't talk about it. So yeah, World War I, right?
Yeah.
So 1 million Armenians were killed. Nobody talks about it. The Jews are experts in memory. We don't let anybody forget. If somebody says there was no Holocaust, they'll never survive. They will clobber them because we are big on memory. We have the 6 things we're supposed to remember at all times. And so he says it was an attack on the very idea of memory. Why? Because these 3 things, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, and Bris Milah, are all a memory. The bris is a memory in your soul and your body. The Shabbos is a memory of creation, and Rosh Chodesh is called the day of Zikaron. So it's all about memory, which I think also is a quintessential Jewish kind of thing. And then, of course, the quintessential in the sense that there's so many shilas. You know, it's a very simple holiday. You say the Hallel. It's on page 678, and you light 8 candles. You start with 1, you finish up with 8. But there's 5 pages of Talmud all about it. And you have whole books that could be written about all the different questions and shilas. So that's just a cute thing that, you know, we turned it into a whole big thing, even though it's really a very simple holiday. You light a candle every night. Okay. Moving along. That was just a cute one. The other idea is Rabim Bi'Amiatim. He started, Charlie was going down that road. I thought he was going to go there. Then no, the idea that, not that we won, that was strange, but the idea that we won, even though we were outnumbered, that's very Jewish, right? That in 1948, we had all 7 armies attacking us, we won, right? 1967, they all thought they were going to obliterate us, we won. 73, they almost killed us. We won. So Rabim Biamatim, that the many would fall in the hands of the few. This is a Jewish idea. Gideon did it. He fought against the enemy with 3,000 people. There's another story very similar to Gideon. It slips my mind at the moment. But the idea that we could defeat great armies, great empires with our small Jewish power and with God's help. So Rabim Biamatim, I think the idea that we're outnumbered and we still win with God's help, that is also a very Jewish kind of an idea. Or, the impact of Jews, even though we're like, less than 1% of the whole world, much less than 1%. The impact that we have in the world, it's part of this being outnumbered and in many ways winning anyway. And then it's contrary to what Charles was trying to argue at the beginning. I don't mean to pick on you, Charlie, but Charlie was saying, I don't know, we won the war. So actually, you might argue the opposite, that the idea that ultimately we didn't win by might. In other words, in the end, nobody's celebrating the Maccabees. Yeah, maybe some kids are singing some songs, or maybe on television they tell you about the Maccabees. But your standard Jew, you know what they're talking about? The candles. Candles? What about all the great heroes? Elazar, he speared the elephant, and then he was stepped on by the elephant. And, I don't know. We beat the Greek Empire. We don't talk about that, because what we're interested in is not by might. We read the Haftorah last week that lo b'chayav lo b'choach, at the end of the page here, the menorah, which represents the state of Israel today, which represented the Second Temple, is a spirit. The Second Temple is all about spirit. Jews are about spirit. We're not about might. So in that sense, the quintessential Jewish holiday, it's not about brawn, it's about spirit. But then we say, wait a second, how can you have a Jewish holiday without eating? Right? You know the old joke that every holiday boils down to a very simple thing, right? That the Gentiles tried to kill us, they didn't succeed, now let's eat, right? But on Chanukah, is it really a mitzvah to eat? And you say, oh yeah, I had a latke. So let me ask you a question. Did you have latkes every night? Because I know we had latkes 3 nights in a row and my stomach was turning. We had a Chanukah dinner. Do we have a Chanukah dinner every night? If there's a mitzvah, you know how it works. If there's a mitzvah, you got to do it. When are you supposed to have the Chanukah dinner? It could be the first night or the third night. Which night is it? It's not serious. You know how Jewish law is. It's very serious. It has to be either like this or like that. You light the candles. It have to be either right or left or right. You can't just do whatever you want to do. So obviously there is no mitzvah of eating. So then how come we have Chanukah dinners? So the Shulchan Aruch says like this. The ribu hasudos, the fact that we have a lot, harbe, sudot, a lot of meals. Shemarbim b'hem, we have a lot, and sudot, they're sudot reshut. The fact that people do make meals, because they do, so it is a quintessential Jewish holiday. People do eat on Chanukah. But it's not a mitzvah. If people want to make a meal, it's not a mitzvah. It's very nice, but it's not a mitzvah. It's if you want to, it's fine. Because the rabbis did not establish this as a day of eating and festivities and drinking, like Purim. However, that's the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo. But the Ramah, who always starts his words with Haggah, he's making a comment, says, wait a second. Yesh omrim, some people say, there's always a second opinion, that's very Jewish. Sheyesh ksas mitzvah, there is a little bit of a mitzvah with more meals. You don't have to have a meal every day, but if you make more meals than usual, it's good. Because the fact that there was a miracle with the oil, that doesn't warrant any meal. But it's a time when we dedicated the temple. Oh, when you dedicate a temple, what we talked about last week, that's a mitzvah in the Torah to celebrate the dedication of a temple. So we have to celebrate. You have to eat something. He says, quoting different books of minhagim, of customs, that, if you have a meal and you sing ma'osur, have a little dreidel, I'm not sure that qualifies, or al hanisim, and you sing songs to God, then it becomes a mitzvah meal anytime. And next Tuesday, if you want to make a meal and you sing songs to God, it's also a mitzvah meal. So you can do that in Chanukah also. It's not no worse than any Tuesday. And so that's why you can have a Chanukah dinner if the chazan sings a few songs. It's a mitzvah. If he doesn't, it's not a mitzvah. Then it's just a dinner. And by the way, there is a mitzvah of eating something, namely cheese. How cheese became potatoes, I don't know. Apparently, at some point they got more potatoes, and they they turned it into potato latkes instead of cheese latkes. But anyway, there used to be a custom to have cheese, special cheese, to remember that Judith seduced the enemy general with cheese, and he chopped off his head, and the Jews won the battle. So there is some sort of eating element. So it's not completely bereft of eating. But so in some ways, it goes back to the point that it's an ethereal, not by might. It's a holiday. It's very Jewish in the sense that it doesn't have food. But then you say, well, wait a second. Yeah, how can you say that? Jews are all about food. So, well, there is an element of food. If you sing a song to God, you can eat the latkes, and it's a mitzvah too. Okay, so that's sort of an interesting twist over there, whether it's very Jewish or maybe anti-Jewish, because there's not enough food. Okay, don't worry, we'll have plenty of food. I think we'll be okay. It's Jewish also in the sense that it relates to the Gentiles. You know, when a Jew stands by himself, he doesn't notice how Jewish he is. You start standing next to a Gentile, then you realize, oh, I'm Jewish. I got to talk to the Gentile. So when the Jews, this is only holiday that relates to the Gentiles. So you say, really? Are you lighting the candles so the Gentile can see it? No, I'm lighting the candles so my next door neighbor can see it, the Jewish neighbor. Maybe not. The Talmud says you should light at the doorpost until the last of the Talmudians leave. Who are the Talmudians? Rashi says it's the name of a nation. There's a nation called Talmud, and as long as Talmudians are still on the road, you can light your candles in the window or in the door. So, but who cares? They're Gentiles. We have to light the candles. The Jewish ritual is for the Gentiles. Apparently, according to Rashi, some people don't agree, but some people say that that's not what Rashi means. But it's a simple reading of Rashi is that he thinks that if you could spread the light to other nations, like the UAE, which I think is over here. UAE, by the way, I think is right there. Then it's good. If you can spread to the other nations, it's a good thing. So it's Jewish in the sense that it forces us to say, I'm Jewish, you're not. Let me tell you about the miracles of God. So it's Jewish in that sense. Now the Taz talks about the famous distinction of why, going back to the idea that it's a holiday that doesn't have food. So he explains the famous idea that, you know, in Purim, we were trying to save our lives, so we celebrate with eating food for our body. But in Chanukah, they were really just trying to destroy our souls. So therefore, we have a spiritual kind of a celebration. My son pointed out, Tani pointed out that Rabbi Yonasan Miluniel, who lived hundreds of years before the Taz, talking about like 1300 as opposed to 1600, said that the reason it's such a great celebration is because the only holiday where they were trying to destroy Judaism. You know, other times they were trying to kill us. Big deal. But they're trying to destroy Judaism. That's serious. And I'm joking. And they're trying to destroy Judaism. So that's why it's such a big holiday. We make it the longest holiday, as long as Sukkot. Sukkot is 8 days. We made a holiday as long as Sukkot. He says if it wasn't the miracle of the candles, we would have made it 8 days anyway, because it's such a big holiday, because it was a spiritual victory. Now, I want to argue it's also a very Jewish, because it's not in the Bible. You see, if you want to be a biblical Jew, you know, there's a book, Living Biblically. So you look in the Jewish Bible, there's no book of Maccabees. So you say, okay, you don't have to do Chanukah. Oh, but the Jews do Chanukah anyway. So then it's part of the oral tradition. So it's quintessential Jewish holiday because Judaism is not based purely on the Bible. It's based on the Talmud, and it's a Talmudic holiday. And that's why leave me alone with the history or whatever. It's a holiday because of the Talmud. That's why it's a holiday. It's not so much in the Mishnah. You look in the Mishnah once in a while, and Baba Kama here, there. In Bikurim, they mention Chanukah, but just in passing. But they don't give you the laws of lighting the candles. It's only in the Talmud, in the Gemara, in the later part of the Talmud, what's called Gemara. There's no traditional text for it. So you know what it is? Sefat Emet says it's the quintessential oral tradition holiday, and that's Jewish. See, the Gentiles, they borrowed the Jewish Bible, and they think, oh, they have the Bible, they know all about Judaism, they have a Seder. But it's really the oral tradition, the Talmud, which is so obtuse and so not so available to the Gentiles. That's the most Jewish thing, and that's why it's the most Jewish of holidays. But you say, wait a second, if it's a quintessential Jewish holiday, and it's supposed to represent the Jewish values, right? Then what about the most important Jewish value is charity and kindness? And if you think for a second, can anyone think, I'm going to move back a slide. Can anyone tell me, what has Chanukah got to do with charity? Anybody? Chesed, kindness. If it's a quintessential Jewish holiday, it should have something to do with kindness. Anybody? Doesn't sound
That one
like
I
it.
don't know. We were under siege. Everybody was, starving or in the middle of a battle. I'm not sure where that one would come in.
Right? So it's not so obvious. I had to think about it myself. let's take a look. So number one,
The
you can
kindness
try to-
of the oil burning for 8 nights.
Yeah. Okay, that tickles an idea in my head that, don't forget, in the Bible, we have a story similar to Chanukah. Namely, that Elisha told this woman, you don't have anything to eat? He says, all she has is a little jug of oil with a tiny bit of oil. She says, I have an idea. Take the jug, he says, get a lot of vessels, and pour out from that jug, at the end of the ketchup bottle, there's always more in the ketchup bottle. There's always more in the shampoo bottle. So keep shaking the shampoo bottle, and you'll have plenty of shampoo. And she did, and she filled the whole house with vessels, and she had enough oil to support herself and to pay all the debtors who were trying to take her children away. So it seems that the story of the oil can also be a story of charity. So that's interesting, but not exactly. But it's a tangential kind of a connection, but it's very interesting. But something else. You could make a drasha about the door. The candles are supposed to be at the door next to your mezuzah. The door is a very inviting place, right? You're really inviting everyone to learn about the miracle, right? So in some ways, there's that. And then also I found on the internet a couple of things. Number one, there was a custom in Italy that they had a special society, Madliki Ner Shabbos, to give people stuff for Shabbos, to light candles and stuff like that. And they had a society, excuse me, Madliki Chanukah, to help people buy Chanukah candles. And they had Shomer Mezuzahs, the guardians of the mezuzah, to help people have mezuzah. So there's an idea of helping people get the Chanukah candles. The Rambam actually says you should sell the shirt on your back to get Chanukah. It's interesting that he doesn't mention the charity element. He doesn't say you should give free candles to everybody. He says you the Jew, poor Jew, you should sell your shirt to have a Chanukah. So he doesn't really mention charity, but there was a custom to provide. The Chabad say in their website that it's a good time to give Chanukah gelt. And what's Chanukah gelt? The idea of Chanukah gelt is not to give presents to the children. You give them some change, and then they could put it in the pushka and give charity. So that's maybe the real meaning of Chanukah gelt, which is the real way it goes. Okay. So even that value, the Jewish chesed value, is maybe it's hidden in the idea of the door or of the Chanukah gelt or providing for Chanukah candles. The Sefat Emet also connects it a little bit with poverty and charity. He says as follows: we should on Chanukah we should ask mercy from God like we are poor people at the door, because it's a time when God does miracles. What does it mean when God does a miracle? It says, without a supernatural thing, you would die. So what does that mean? You don't really deserve it. So what does that mean? You're poor. You're poor and lacking mitzvot. So that's why what do the poor people do in general? They go around to the different doors. They knock on the door. So again, the door is connected to the poor person. And the truth is that that usually we're knocking on God's door the whole year. But then on these days, the doors, God opens up the doors. So there's something about doors and poor people that's connected to Purim and to Chanukah, and the idea that we were like a poor person who turned to God and said, hey, we're basically a bunch of Hellenists, and we've been eating pig for the last 10 years. But could you do us a favor and help us rebuild this temple and beat the Greeks, and we'll get started again. So that's we were poor. We were very poor. And finally, the value of life. That we know that's why we just closed the shul. Why? Because I have a yurt site tonight. I'm not going to say Kaddish. Why? There's all these people have COVID. I'm not going to be part of that spreading of the COVID, because life is more important. We'll learn tonight in Nishma's memory of my father, Baruch Chaim Shmuel, my beloved father. Thank God I could teach a little bit at his yurt site, and because life comes first. And when the Beis Hamikdash was around, says the Sefat Emet, life would come from the Beis Hamikdash to the whole world. And through the lighting of menorah, we bring light and life to the whole world. So the Chanukah candle represents life, which is the quintessential Jewish value, right? We don't think like some churches do. They're like, oh, we have to have church. It's an essential service. No, the most important thing is life. If you have to close the synagogue, you close the synagogue. And the Sefat Emet says that that's part of Chanukah, because when there was a Beis Hamikdash, the Beis Hamikdash was the source of life for the whole world. the Beis Hamikdash, there are no dead people in the Beis Hamikdash. There's nobody who even came in contact with the dead for 7 days in the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash is a place, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem is a place of life, no death. And when you have a menorah on your window, it reminds you of that beacon of light and life that is Chanukah. And this may explain why the Rambam says the mitzvah of Chanukah is a very beloved mitzvah. Why? Says Rabbi Michael Rosenzweig, my mechutin, because of all the values it represents. So we're claiming that it represents all these different values. Which values? So Thanksgiving, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, time, Mila, Bris Mila, the covenant with God, memory, mitzvah opportunity, the power of the minority, the spirit over might, the light unto the nations, eating, right? That we should sanctify the eating, the ethereal rather than the physical, the oral Torah rather than the written, the charity and chesed and life. So because of these many values that it represents, that's why it's a very beloved mitzvah, says the Rambam. What do you mean it's beloved? Every mitzvah is beloved. Shabbos is not beloved. Why are you saying that Chanukah is beloved? Because even though it's a rabbinic holiday, it's very beloved. It's very special. Why? Because it represents all these values. But Rabbi Rosenzweig didn't give this list of values. He gave a different list. He says, look in the Rambam. In the Rambam's telling, we'll conclude with this. The Rambam's telling there are certain values. Let's try to find them. It's the little game of Where's Waldo? During the period of the Second Temple, when the kings were in power, the Greeks were in power, they proclaimed decrees against the Jewish people, abrogating their religion, and forbidding them to study Torah. So it's about Torah and mitzvos. The Chanukah is where they were trying to abolish Torah and mitzvos, and we have reestablished Torah and mitzvos. It represents the value of Torah and mitzvos. They laid their hands on their wealth and their daughters. So Rabbi Soloveitchik, when I was in his class, he said, you know what that is? Jewish dignity. When a Gentile thinks they can just walk over to a Jewish girl and abduct her and take her, oh, you're getting married here, let me sleep with you first. That's what the Greeks used to do to us. Oh, someone's getting married, they have to sleep with the general or the governor before the wedding night. When that's going on, we have no dignity. And Chanukah is about the revival of the Jewish dignity. That's Rabbi Soloveitchik's thought. Or if they're putting their hands on our wealth, they're taking taxes they don't deserve. That's also an attack on Jewish dignity. We should live in poverty because of the Greeks. They entered the temple, they broke it, they defiled it. The people of Israel were sorely distressed. They oppressed them ruthlessly until God took pity, saved us, and rescued us from their hands. So it's about God's providence. The Hashmonaim, great priests, won victories, defeating the Greek Syrians and saving Israel from their power. They set up a king among the priests, and Israel's kingdom was restored for a period of more than 2 centuries until the destruction of the Second Temple. And from this, it seems that the Rambam is in favor of Jewish sovereignty, Jewish dignity, and that these are the values that it represents according to the Rambam. And I think Rabbi Rosenzweig was claiming that if it represents these values, that's why it's a very beloved mitzvah according to the Rambam. So what are the values in the Rambam? Torah and mitzvahs, Jewish dignity, family, purity, divine intervention, Jewish sovereignty. Those are the values. And if it represents those values, which are quintessential Jewish values, family, purity, divine intervention, God is always with us. The candle, the eastmost candle, the Ner Tamid, represents the idea that God is always with us. And those are the essential Jewish values. Anything that it represents, the essential Jewish values, is a very beloved mitzvah, particularly beloved mitzvah, says the Rambam. So is this the quintessential, the most Jewish of holidays? I argue, yes, absolutely it is, because it represents so many of the Jewish values, whether on this list or the Rambam list. These are the essential values, and therefore it's the quintessential Jewish holiday.